2026 around the corner. Sunday, 1st of February is when Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is going to disclose to the country what is in her Bahi Khata as far as India's economy in FY 2027 is concerned. Well, there are expectations, there are recommendations, and of course, hopes are pinned once again on the Finance Minister to deliver some more sops for the taxpayer. Will that or won't that come through? Well, we have this morning the Director General of FICCI, Jyoti, joining us. We will come to the tax part, Jyoti, but first up, thank you so much for joining us. I want to understand, given India's strong macroeconomic fundamentals, the high-frequency indicators suggesting that the economy is moving in the right direction despite the global turmoil, can we expect Budget 2026 to chart out a course for double-digit growth in FY 27?
I think, of course, for last two budgets, we have seen that, while the capex has been maintained, there's been a lot of effort to also give demand impetus, be it in form of the income tax rate slab rationalization or the GST rate rationalization, and many other reform measures that have been taken, is all in the direction to ensure that, the investment really picks up and we start kind of moving towards a much higher growth rate. And like you also rightly said, we've already the highest growing, we already have the highest growth rate, in this very volatile world. And even the IMF has shown very, very positive projections. So I think with all the measures that have been taken, once we start seeing the results of those on ground, we are very confident that, we shall be able to, be, on the path of the Viksit Bharat mission that has been defined by the
Viksit Bharat, of course. But coming to Viksit Bharat, there's also this question on Atmanirbhar defense. And FICCI, I've seen in your paper, has suggested a 10% hike to the 6.81 lakh crore rupee allocation for the Ministry of Defense. But you're also saying that 30% share of that should be towards capital outlay from the 26% earlier. So what exactly should that 30% outlay really focus on?
So basically, a lot of modernization that needs to be done because technology is defining the warfare today. We've seen that in our recent experience of Operation Sindoor that we had. So there is massive amount of investments that are required in that space. So we said that while 10% growth is good, but you just ensure that there's enough that is spent on the capital side of it rather than revenue, which means that making far more investments in modernizing our defense equipments, which private sector is also doing a lot of work. There is collaboration that is happening, but I think we need to have stocks for a certain good period to ensure that, in the eventuality of real aggression from various corners, I think we should be able to meet with that. So we definitely feel that this capital outlay will most certainly help in maintaining and enhancing our warfare technology.
Right. And from warfare, let's move to electronics manufacturing. That has also been a success story for India, not just for Apple iPhones, but even advances in the semiconductor assembly and testing, as well as manufacturing of semiconductors finding its feet. So should Budget 2026 incentivize component manufacturing, especially for the printed circuit boards, which again is a key recommendation from FICCI?
Sure enough. I mean, we need to kind of, have the self-reliance in the supply chain as well. And I think that's one of the key things which even government is driving, and we at FICCI are very aggressively working towards that. But I think PLI in white goods also has done very well. And even in mobile, you might say Apple, but there are a lot of local companies which have benefited tremendously through the PLI. But indeed, I think value chain is something which needs to be, where we need to be self-reliant as well. And one of the items that we had really, I focused on was the PCBAs, the printed circuit board assemblies. And these constitute on an average about 35 to 40% of the bill of materials, which is the highest contributor to the overall production cost of the electronic items. And these are instead of, if we can import, we can increase the manufacturing within the ecosystem by nearly about 45%, which can strengthen our whole supply chain and the electronic manufacturing ecosystem. So we at FICCI had, at the behest of the Scale Committee, which has been set up at the government level, we'd commissioned a very comprehensive study on PCBAs for charting out a roadmap that could help minimize the imports by 2030 in this particular segment. And what we figured was that 3.5 million data lines over 5 years, these were studied, and this highlighted that PCB imports are scattered across 450 HS codes with varying tariff structures. So making the policy formulation and the analysis therefore becomes very, very complex. Hence, the recommendation was that if we could have, rationalization of the HS codes, if we can introduce a single HS code for each of the PCBA board assembly, because there are varying kind, and you cannot really see what is there, what is not there. So that rationalization will help us do a very deeper, finer study to pinpoint on which PCBA essentially we need to kind of work on. Also,
Right.
the duty differential of 25% between PCBAs and the finished product. If we can take care of that, it will help in augmenting the domestic assembly and the value addition while avoiding the duty inversion. So these were two very specific recommendations that came out of the study, which will
Right.
help in taking care of that particular component. And we worked very closely also with METI on the electronic component scheme as well.
Right.
And we are big votary of that. And we do hope, things in these direction will certainly move forward.
Absolutely.
Plus, I think the semicon effort that government has put in. Some amount of movement we have seen there, but I think this has to be done in a very
Right.
significantly big
So,
way.
very closely linked to this, Jyoti, which is also the rare earth magnets. And we saw the curbs that China made last year and what it created, the kind of havoc it created in the world. So, closely linked to that is also the mining sector. So, do you think India also needs to reform its mining sector, and should that come through in Budget 2026?
So, we were actually talking about the critical mineral tailings, etc. There are dumps and trailings in the current mining areas. So, if there could be policy, and we were very happy to see this come yesterday itself, that apart from, so within the critical mineral mission, they've also included this part, because this is something which is available at home, and we are able to kind of map all of these and help in identifying, help private sector make some investments towards that. I think that can be a good beginning in itself. And then, of course, I mean, government has come out with the PLI and rare earth minerals, so we have to see that's a significant investment that they talked about. So there are 4 or 5 allocations also which have been done. So we hope that things will move in that direction. But when you talk of mining per se, I think there is a big ask on removal of royalty on royalty, because miners pay the royalty on the sale price. And this also includes, there are various other levies like the payments that are made to the district mineral fund, it is made to the national mineral exploration fund, etc. And this is on the account of very anomalous calculation of the average sale price,
Right.
which includes the mining operation cost, logistics, taxes, and levies as well.
Sure.
So this is supposedly a double taxation on them. This has been well acknowledged by the ministry. Center has issued the notification, but we need to, get to the implementation
Absolutely.
stage. So I think that's something which is very important, whether it is, again, reiterated in the budget, or
Right.
we have the cabinet secretary, the committee which is set up to work with the states on ease of doing business, takes it up. I
Okay.
think this is very important as well. There's also an issue of compensation afforestation. So, every time you do mining on a certain land, you have to have the compulsory afforestation done. But sometimes the states are not able to identify that land within their state. So could we have this fungibility with the other states, saying, as a nation, we need to have the green patch created in certain. So how do we, create that kind of fungibility as well in other states is something which could be considered. I think more specific to the rare earth, what we have seen is the current mining and extraction is largely concentrated under the Rare Earths Limited, which is the PSU. So it's all largely in the public sector space. How
Okay.
do we bring in, private sector space in some of the non-sensitive rare earth materials? And we can have a regulatory framework, obviously, around that. PPP models could be created, whereas the PSUs can hold the strategic control, but even the private firms can bring in, the capital and the technology, which
Right.
could again be defined under the regulatory framework. And we need the time-bound approvals for various projects aligned with the national missions that have been announced.
Right.
Also, we could have dedicated RE processing clusters, which could have shared separation plants. We can have the common effluent treatments, plug and play infrastructure, etc. That just kind of strengthens the ecosystem and helps us, have a larger play in this area. I
Okay.
think, moreover, there are countries other than China which are working on technology. You have
That's right.
Australia, you have Japan, you have EU. These countries are working on technology.
Sure.
So how do we enable our private sector to kind of collaborate and work on this technology, converting the rare earth into the technology which is needed to meet our green ambitions
Absolutely. Of
moving
course, we
forward.
need the
So
technology
I think
for
these
our
are some
green
of
earth
the answers.
minerals. But finally, I want to come to some consumer-centric, citizen-centric issues, Ms. Widge, and let's talk about employment generation, especially for urban India, which continues to be a challenge. What do you think should be the government's focus beyond the employment-linked schemes? Should it be boosting GCCs, AI, R&D, urban employment hubs, or should it be the last mile job creation? What do you think should be in the government's budget for 2026 as far as employment goes?
So, over the years, there have been a lot of schemes that have been announced by the government as far as employment, skilling, all of that is concerned. We are well seized of this problem. Measures are being taken. But what we see is that, you keep coming after scheme after scheme. Now, the most recent is the employment linked incentive scheme, which is supposedly, will help step up some of the employment as well, because there are a lot of incentives that are planned. But I think more important here may not be to have yet another policy, but be able to, consolidate what we have. How do we really strengthen the institutional pipeline? We can connect the diploma institutions, the polytechnics, the skilling providers, etc. How do we really, bring all of them together? We have the shared infrastructure, curriculum alignment, credit portability, etc. Formal industry partnerships could be created where we could have seamless transition from education to employment. So I think a lot more needs to be done on outcome-based incentivization framework, which are linked to the verified placement outcomes, etc. So the institutions which are imparting skilling, how do we really bring the placement as a very defined outcome out there, so that they are held responsible for whatever curriculum they bring in, that it is relevant for one to get employed. We can, there could be development of digital tools for post-placement work immersion and satisfaction grading, capturing employer feedback on job stability, skill upgradation, etc.
Right.
And there's a need to really do a lot of outreach as well on some of the
Absolutely
schemes that
right.
have already been announced by the government. There is the PM Setu Yojana. How do we really make that more effective? How do we bring the whole ecosystem together around this? How do we get students, into it and be able to meet the requirements that are emerging out of the areas that you rightly
Sure.
mentioned, which is R&D, GCC, AI, etc., which is going to change the whole landscape of, the jobs
Right.
that are going to be created in the coming
Absolutely right.
years. So it's more about what we have. Let's kind of assess, consolidate, bring all the players together and make it more outcome based.
Absolutely outcome based. Let's leave it at that. Jyoti Widge, DG FICCI, thank you so much for joining us and for your time here on News 9.